Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a new releases wrap-up specifically for 5 fantasy new releases. And I have actually already done an in-depth non-spoiler review for Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm going to start with that one, and if you've already watched that review or you've heard plenty of other people talk about it and you don't need to hear any more about it, I'll have timestamps for all the books that I'm going to talk about, but with this first one in particular, I know some of you might want to skip ahead so you can hear about things that you haven't been flooded with reviews for already. So I'm going to start with Babel though, in case there are some of you who haven't really seen or had the time to look at any other reviews. So Babel follows a young boy named Robin. He is Cantonese, but was brought over to Britain when he was a young boy, and he was raised by a man named Professor Lovell. And it's very clear that he feels like he's indebted to this man for bringing him out of a very difficult situation. There was a lot of people who were very sick where he was. His mother died, and he likely would have died himself. So he feels like he should be very grateful to this person who has now essentially adopted him and given him a chance at a, quote, better life. But as Robin is getting older, he's starting to recognize that there are some things about the expectations placed on him, as well as what society expects of him, that he's not necessarily okay with. Initially, Robin is finding he's enjoying his studies, he's enjoying the chance to learn. He'll eventually go to Oxford and then translate texts for them there, and then those translations will be used to better the country. However, he's recognizing that the ways in which their society would be benefited isn't necessarily benefiting a lot of other people's societies, including the one that he was originally from, the ones that his friends are from. And so he has to kind of wrestle with this, am I actually contributing to the downfall of other groups of people? And am I doing so through the act of translation? So the full title of Babel, or Babel, because it's a different pronunciation depending on where you're from, but it says Babel, or the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution. And that's really what it comes down to, is they're trying to decide if they want to continue to have this academic life where a lot is provided for them, even though that comes at the expense of they know someone else from afar, or do they upset not only their lives, but a lot of other people's lives to try and break the system down and then build something better. There were so many different themes hit on in this book. It is the first book in a series, and there were a lot of very powerful moments. There were a lot of quotable moments. I do think that if there was a formal new adult age range, that I think this would be placed there, simply because of how the themes are delivered and how they're executed. The ways in which our characters speak to one another, how they talk about whatever various theme is at the forefront. And I do think that the themes are quite on the nose. If there was an actual new adult age range, I would say probably something like 18 to 25. It's people that are coming out of I've discovered who I am, now I'm discovering how I fit into the world, I'm trying to learn how to not only better educate myself, but then be a better member of society, and I have to really challenge my worldviews and all those sorts of things. We have that done through the character Robin. And so that's part of why I think it would fit really, really well for that age range. And then again, just how the characters talk to one another, how they process things. I just think it would fit really well in new adult. If you are somebody who absolutely loves fantasy, you love really complex magic systems, you love discovering a new world, I do think that you're maybe going to be a little disappointed, because this one, it definitely feels more historical than fantasy. The fantasy elements are tied to how they use their language with silver and how that creates magical properties within silver. But otherwise, the rest of it is historical fiction. And then the last thing I'll mention is that I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang back when it came out, and I do think that this book follows very similar story beats, and as a result, it made it quite predictable for me because I'd read that other book. I just felt like I already knew the direction our main character was going to go. I kind of knew how they were going to change their views and what they would feel towards the end of the story. And the character is not the same as Rin from The Poppy War, but I do think that their progression is very similar. And I found certain things to be somewhat predictable. Again, though, it's the themes that I think are the focus of the book. So the predictability or the amount of magic or the amount of world building. I don't really think that's the main focus. However, if you're somebody who loves those things, you might find this isn't actually going to live up to the hype for you. Next up, we actually have another historical fantasy, and that would be Monsters, We Defy. So unlike Babel, this one I think is going under people's radar. I think it deserves a lot more attention. I actually think it's quite unfortunate that it came out around the same time as R.F. Kuang's work, because R.F. Kuang, so many people have picked that book up. It has been number one, I believe, in fiction all around, not just fantasy. So that one has so much attention on it right now. And Monsters We Defy, I think, deserves a few more people looking over at it, because it was a lot of fun while simultaneously being quite moving and touching on some really important themes. So Monsters We Defy follows a woman named Clara Johnson. It takes place in 1920s Washington, D.C., and she is a character who has the ability to essentially communicate with spirits, enigmas. And some of them provide you with a curse and a boon. They call the curses tricks. And what usually transpires is somebody who is in a desperate situation or who very badly wishes for something. They will be contacted by one of these spirits, and they'll make a deal with them. You have this boon. However, if you accept this, you will also have this curse. And a lot of times the curses don't really seem like a big deal initially. And so our cast of characters are primarily made up of people who have accepted these boons, but then have these curses that go along with it. So they all kind of have their own really unique powers to some degree. And they're not really, really extreme. Some of them, for example, one person has the ability to make people forget things temporarily. And I don't want to say too much about what their curse is, because it was so sad. I felt so bad for this character. This book almost was written in a way where when you're introduced to a new character, you get a little snippet, almost like a mini short story about them. And I actually really liked the way it was delivered. I would categorize this as a cozy heist. Not a cozy mystery, but a cozy heist, because you get this group of people together. And at the end of the day, what their main goal is they're trying to steal this magical ring. And if they do this, our main character, Clara, the curse that is placed on her will be lifted. And so she's very intrigued by this opportunity, and she has some other people that join her in this task, and they're all using their various abilities to try and accomplish this. But regardless, with the magic, whenever a new character was introduced, you learn a little bit more about them. If they do have magic, you learn about it as well. And it was really fun. It felt like I was watching almost like an Ocean's 11 type, where, oh, now this person's introduced and here's their deal, and then here's this person that's introduced. They all have very distinct personalities. It was really, really fun. It is touching on some themes of racism. It also talks about trying to fit into a society where, while slavery has been abolished for some time at this point, it was not so long ago that direct family members were enslaved. Consequences and the terrible results of that are still affecting people's lives at this time. And you do see that with our characters, with their former family members, and also just how society is as a whole. It's not like, oh, well, slavery ended, so everybody is nice and cool and really respectful to one another now. And so you dive into some of those things. But like I said, there's this fun feeling to the whole story, despite some of the heavier things that are written within it. I had a really good time with it. I thought it was great. It was also quite short, so if you're going to be really busy this holiday season, you need something just quick, this one I think would fit really well with that. After that, we have a sequel, A Venom, Dark and Sweet. And this is the sequel to A Magic Steeped in Poison, which also came out this year. I quite liked A Magic Steeped in Poison. I'm going to talk a little bit about that one just because I can't say too much about the sequel, or it would give away plot points and obviously maybe ruin your reading experience of the first one. With The Magic Steeped in Poison, we follow a main character named Ning. She is a Xingyang Qi, which is somebody who is an expert in the magical art of tea making. I actually really enjoyed the magic. I thought it was fascinating. It has to do with the water and almost like a connection to the earth through the tea itself, where the components come from. And so she has this ability to almost connect with people in the spiritual realm to some degree. And she can sort of escape time. She can compel people. She can learn about people. It was really fascinating. It had this almost ethereal feel to it, which I thought was really cool. And I've just not really come across a magic system like that before. However, our main character is feeling very disconnected to this craft to some degree because it was through brewing tea and serving it to her mother that her mother ended up being poisoned, and our main character felt like she should have known this. At the start of the story then, she's just lost her mother and her sister is now sick as well, and she decides to enter into a competition to find the next Shenyangshi. And in doing this, if she can win this competition and gain the favor of the royalty, the princess, she might have the ability to have her sister saved. And in doing this, she's suddenly surrounded by a lot of people of prestige, of wealth. She's finding there's a lot of things going on, a lot of scheming and politics that she's kind of from a more rural area and she is unaccustomed to this. So she's trying to navigate this new political sphere to the best of her abilities. She's trying to focus on the competition. She's concerned about her sister. So there's a lot of things that are going on. And the first book leaves off definitely with a, well, man, what's going to happen next? So the second book, it picks up right where the first book left off. There is a little bit more of a quest sort of plot line in the second book. And I would say the mythology and how much of a myth it really is definitely comes more into play in the second one. The magic, even though the competition was a great way to be presented it, in this one you actually see it outside of a competition setting and you're seeing it more used in a survival sense. We did get a second perspective in this one. The first one only follows one person and it is first person narration. And in the second book, you have that same perspective as well as an additional one in third person. And I did like the addition of this. I actually kind of wish, I don't know, we couldn't really have gotten that perspective in the first one because there's some reveals, so it wouldn't have worked, but I almost wish this one had been longer and we'd been able to see a little bit more of this character, get to know them a little bit better. I was surprised because there was almost a sullen feel to the whole book, which I actually think you don't find all that often in young adult. While this wasn't an absolute favorite necessarily, I am really excited to see what this author writes next. I enjoyed this duology. I thought it was really unique. I really like her writing. I liked the tone and the feel of it, but I am excited to see her write more, and I kind of hope that her next series is maybe longer than duology, because I really feel like we could get to know her characters more. I think it would be great. Next up, we have Furysong. This is the third and final book in the Aurelian Cycle trilogy. I love this series. It is one of my favorite series of all time. I not too long ago did my top 5 completed fantasy series, and this book, well, I should say this trilogy is there because it's fantastic. However, this third book might actually be my least favorite of the trilogy. That's not to say I thought it was bad. It's just I love the second book especially. I love, love, love the themes in the second book, how they're executed, the nuance, and the different angles to these really difficult topics. I just absolutely loved that second book. I loved the first book. As soon as I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody should check this book out. And then I read the second one and I was nervous because I was like, what if though it's not as good as the first? And it was so good. And then this third one is hard to compete because I just love those first two so much. I do think this third one has the saddest moment. So it wins in that regard. I mean, I was fighting back tears. I will discuss what this is about in a second. I did a spoiler discussion with my friend Jessie May over on my Patreon. And when I was talking about that scene, I was like, I don't want to cry right now. I'm sorry. I'm getting emotional. It was just, oh my gosh. I'm thinking about it and I'm getting sad thinking about it. So I got to move on and actually not just squeal at you and tell you more about it. So the first book, because it is, of course, the third book in the series, so a little setup. The first story follows the aftermath of a revolution. We are seeing a new regime trying to establish itself, and within that you have two perspectives, both from very different backgrounds, who, as a result of the revolution, both have similar opportunities now, and they definitely would not have if the previous regime was still in power. So those two main perspectives are Annie and Lee. Annie was formerly a serf, and then Lee was actually a part of the ruling family. However, people do not realize who he is because after the revolution, he was in an orphanage, and it was in this orphanage that him and Annie met each other. It's the way that the new regime is trying to have power, how it's trying to establish itself, all the little details that are done throughout the story, and the difficulties of this new form of government. That is what really took it to the... Well, that's not true. Everything about it is like next level. The relationships between the characters, the exploration of trauma, the aftermath of a revolution, all done so well. Dissecting different forms of government, great. The nods to Plato's Republic, fantastic. In the second book, a lot of the themes have to do with freedom of press and honesty to the people and how equal is everyone really. You also get a new perspective introduced in the second book, and then in this third one you get a fourth perspective. I think that this one actually felt like it was the most personal to the characters themselves. The other ones, even though you have first-person narration, I actually feel like it is looking at how things affect a civilization, how things affect society. It's some of those things that are the hardest hitting. And in this third book, it's the personal things to the characters that are hard hitting. And that one scene that I was flipping out about a second ago is a great example of it. And they're put through so much, these poor characters. And I have said of this that I think it is both equal parts tragic and triumphant. So it is a great conclusion. It's a great book. It's a great trilogy. I can't recommend it enough. And then last for today, we have The Darkening. This is the first book in a series. It follows a girl named Vesper, who is the daughter of failed revolutionaries. And her mother is no longer alive. Her father has kind of lived his life in secret, and therefore Vesper has as well. And her father does not want to teach her about the magic that he is an expert in because he does not want his daughter to be caught up in the same things that he was caught up in when he was younger. However, our main character cannot help but be intrigued by this magic, which is known as iconomancy. I actually really liked the creativity of the magic. It had to do with drawing certain almost runes to create certain commands or functions, and I was so invested. The first chunk of this book reminded me a lot of An Ember in the Ashes. It picks up and it's going, and there's high stakes immediately. There's also this cursed storm that comes through, and the lower classes are they don't have much of a chance of escaping the storm, and if they are touched by the storm, then they are cursed, and everybody has these very different curses from one person to the next, and some of them are awful, some of the things that can happen to people as a result. I was so invested, and I was so excited about the first part of this book. However, I don't even know if it was necessarily the second half, but at some point, the plot went in a slightly different direction. And then once it entered this new area where our character is sort of infiltrating a different group of people, she's trying to help someone she cares about. And so she's going on the inside, trying to get information, trying to figure out where they're holding this person that she cares about. She wants to save them. And I just thought that the pacing ended up being kind of strange, and I thought our focus suddenly shifted. And I was so invested in what we were having occur here that when it shifted, I was kind of disappointed a little because I liked so much the other thing that we were doing, the other things we were doing at the beginning. There is an enemies to lovers trope within this, and I like that trope, but I thought it progressed a little quickly for my taste. I actually felt like this first book could have been 2 books. Really, really excited for whatever this author writes next because I think the creativity is fantastic. I think the establishing of stakes, the pulling you in immediately, making you care immediately, I thought they did that very, very well. That's it for some recent new fantasy releases. If you've read any of these, feel free to let me know your thoughts on them. What are some other new releases that you've checked out as of late? But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.